Thrilled to get to be in conversation with everyone as part of the Women in Tech Global Conference. Thank you, Women in Tech Network, for hosting. My co-founder and Chief Product Officer, Heather, and I. Welcome to how to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a reality with virtual reality. I'm Lee Smith. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Praxis Labs, and I just feel so grateful because in my role, I get to work with DEI and L&D and business leaders from some of the world's largest companies, thinking about how to solve some of their most pressing people challenges by inspiring a culture of inclusion, collaboration, and innovation. And really, this is at the heart of what we'll get to discuss today, why DEI is so valuable for business outcomes, particularly during times of market uncertainty, and how immersive learning is emerging as one of the most powerful and impactful ways that businesses can move the needle on not just DEI, but really on creating workplaces that work for everyone, but also creating products and services that serve everyone. So excited to dive in, but before we do, I would love to have Heather, my co-founder, my confidant, and Praxis Labs Chief Product Officer, share a little bit more about what we do at Praxis Labs.
Hello, everyone. It's so exciting to be here. I'm thrilled to be in community with and to hear from so many other inspiring women leaders in this industry. So to give a little bit of background, Praxis Labs is an immersive learning company that empowers organizations to build more inclusive and effective workplaces. Our platform combines cutting-edge technology with research-backed curricula and actionable insights to deliver impactful learning experiences and really drive real behavior change at scale. We are committed to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in all that we do, including helping our clients and partners embed DEI best practices in their culture, policies, products, and services, to what Elise was saying earlier. So I'm really excited to be having this conversation with Elise, where we'll be asking each other a few questions, and we'll also be leaving a few moments at the end to answer any questions that come from the audience. So before we dive in, Anthony, who's on our team, who just mentioned that they're in the chat, will be monitoring this chat so that if you have any questions, please add them there. So let's dive in. Let's start off by just talking about the business case for DEI. A lot of people have been making this argument for what seems like a really long time now. A lot of companies and research already have shared reports on how DEI boosts productivity, innovation, culture, and ultimately the business bottom line. But I think a lot of companies have struggled to get DEI right. If we break it down, what exactly is the business case for DEI? Where are companies struggling to get it right?
Yeah, Heather, I mean, I think we talk about this every day with our teams, with our clients, with our learners, but really the story plays out in that having a diverse workforce, employees from all different backgrounds, means that you're able to serve those diversity of the customers and the clients that you have. You can expand productivity. But that narrative actually isn't fully complete, because really what we need to do is focus on the levers that drive inclusion, belonging, and engagement. Because once those three things are in place, inclusion, belonging, and engagement, what we know to be true is that companies have greater success with innovation. They have greater productivity. And it's makes sense, right? Like when people feel like they can bring their best ideas to the table, that there is safety in challenging and giving feedback, and that all perspectives are actually heard and listened to, well, no wonder that has differentiated outcomes. And, you know, what we sometimes say and think about at Praxis is that while DE&I is in this moment of some side, like there's some, it's a term that doesn't always land positively with everyone, right? We're so siloed in our communities and society that there's a little bit of a cultural moment happening. And I think it's tied to this notion that diversity, equity, and inclusion hasn't always been inclusive for folks. And it's why sometimes we think it's a little bit of a misnomer, that oftentimes when we use that term, we're really just ensuring that we aren't causing harm and that we're actually creating more value for everyone. And we see success with when we see that meaningful change in behavior. And the way to change behaviors to ensure that everyone feels included, that they belong, that harm isn't done, is by helping people build the skills the knowledge, and then actually practicing that skill and that knowledge to better collaborate, to better work across difference, so that when you enter that workspace, which is often the most diverse space that many of us have entered because of how segregated society is, we're actually able to inspire psychological safety, create peak performance within teams, because there is an understanding of how to work with folks who might be different than you.
Absolutely. I love how you are tying that DEI is really at the heart of how do we inspire psychological safety? How do we have peak performance across our teams? But, I think bringing us to this current moment, there is so much uncertainty in this market. There's a lot of change happening, and we see this deep need to get employee engagement and belonging right. But at the same time, we're seeing all these really large companies think about where can they cut and how do they think about sustainable business. And so unfortunately, we're seeing that some of these programs are the first to be cut. Why do you think that focusing on DEI is especially important during these times, and how can companies make sure that their efforts in this area are not deprioritized when faced with financial challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it is such a good question. And it's one that I've heard in numerous conversations, not just over the last couple of months, but maybe the past couple of weeks. And I think it comes down to this fact that some of us have, and unfortunately, we've separated the work of DE&I from the actual business work that we have to do. That you go through your day-to-day job, and then, also there's DEI training, or, also there's I should think about DE&I, but it's not in the flow of work. And I think what we need to do is reframe and reposition what DE&I is. It's why I say sometimes it's a misnomer, because really it comes down to solving business problems, just like any other functional department, work project. It's about focusing on people, giving them the support and training they need to meet that modern, diverse, often global workforce. And I think what I'm hearing from chief learning officers, learning and development leaders, chief diversity officers, and really just functional business leaders, from directors of engineering to heads of sales, is that particularly in these uncertain times, it is the moment when companies should be building skills related to agility, related to resilience, related to navigating ambiguity. And we've seen recent reports that soft or durable or human skills are often among the highest prioritized for businesses, not just in this year, but in the next year. Skills like management, communication, inclusive leadership, giving feedback, all of those things are so necessary right now. And I think, Heather, you and I know that this is why we started Praxis. It's to improve people's experiences at work, particularly for folks from underrepresented backgrounds who workplaces haven't always been set up for. But it's also because the ways that DEI training has been done, like I said, separate in a different box, is something to do, check the box and move on with your day-to-day job, hasn't created the outcomes that we've been looking for. And despite, I think numbers say over 8 billion that have been invested in DEI tech and training over the last year, 60% of employees feel less connected to their coworkers. And more than half of the workforce who left their jobs say it was because they didn't have a sense of belonging. And, I think it makes it clear that this isn't just a people problem, right? It's a business one. And the cost is often employee turnover, resulting in trillions of dollars lost globally per year. Not to mention, when your best talent walks out the door and into your competitor, the loss of value. And so, we talked about this a lot when we started Praxis, Heather, but I'm curious if you would share with this group, what inspired you to start working in VR and immersive tech? Why did you believe it was a game changer for DE&I?
Yeah, I feel a little silly sharing this with you, Elise, because so much of this story I feel like is shared between the two of us. But for folks on the line, I come at this from both my own personal passions and my professional experiences. I grew up as the daughter of immigrants. Both my parents immigrated from China, and growing up just had to think about, how do I marry my own identity as Asian American and grapple with these questions of belonging and inclusion. And I think it really comes to a head when you think about workplaces and places that we frequent every day. And so as I was thinking about what kind of impact do I want to have with my work and where do I want to spend my time and energy, I was really drawn to this idea of technology as a way to change the way that we work with one another, communicate with one another, learn from one another. And so ended up studying electrical engineering at Stanford, got introduced to virtual reality when I was there, really inspired by the fact that it was this emergent technology. At the time, I think the headset was heavy, it hurt my neck when wearing it, it was tethered, but I knew there was something there. I felt really inspired by the rate of change. And so ended up going to NASA, where I was researching computer vision and augmented reality as ways to help pilots take off and land more safely. Just saw firsthand that there was true training outcomes differentials between what you could do in AR and VR versus the traditional learning mechanisms. Continued on to Microsoft, where I worked on the HoloLens, and Microsoft at the time was thinking about how do you apply AR to these wide-scale industries, really thinking about enterprises as a whole. And ultimately, by the time I went back to school for my master's, had the good fortune of meeting Elise when she was there. We were able to bond over the need for DEI work, these personal passions that both of our lived experiences brought, and the opportunity for immersive for DEI training. I think a lot of our work is rooted and inspired by the virtual human interaction lab at Stanford, where they really focus on how do we tie VR to empathy building. For example, I think there was research that came out of that lab that showed that if you participated in a VR experience detailing what it was like to be homeless, it actually made people exhibit more empathetic behaviors to homeless people, more likely to support affordable housing than other participants in the study. And I think across the research spectrum, immersive learning has proven results. PwC has shown that VR-based learners are 40% more confident in applying their learnings than those who use more traditional L&D content. And so there's clearly something here with immersive learning, being able to show and develop empathy and show soft skill development that way. Even at Praxis, as we're thinking about this and measuring the impact, this whole conversation about ROI, making sure that we're tying this to make DEI training a greater reality. We see this impact firsthand. At a Fortune 100 software company, we saw that Praxis Labs learners were 15% less likely to look for alternative jobs, 8% more motivated, 7% more engaged than non-Praxis learners. So there's clearly something here that's immersive learning is able to unlock and untap within this environment.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is what we do day and night, is think about that impact of immersive learning. And I think obviously your personal story, your background was so inspiring to me when we met, and really being able to work with you and go on this journey has just been such a privilege. So we talked about some of the stats, some of the impact, how it's being deployed, what research is showing. But do you think that immersive learning itself is enough? When we've thought with not just with Praxis, but what we've seen in the field, what are common pitfalls that you think it's important to name when companies or that companies should avoid when they start on an immersive learning journey?
Yeah, it's a great question because, I think immersive learning as a whole, or an immersive experience, can feel so emotionally powerful. But once you see the real impact, you have to think about this not as like a one-off experience or a standalone experience, but really, how do we embed this within a broader learning strategy? And really think about this in terms of continuous learning, going on this learning journey as opposed to just one or two experiences. So ultimately, the success of any learning experience should be measured by the behavior change in an individual learner or by a cultural or systemic change of the organization. That is really what we're trying to get at here. It's not just, how do we pull at the heartstrings at an individual, but really thinking about behavior and systemic change. So are learners acquiring and applying skills based on their learning experience? Are they changing their real world behaviors and how they collaborate with colleagues? One way that we think about measuring this is connecting the immersive learning experience to the actual workplace, where they can practice strategies between modules, complete commitments to apply their learnings. For example, we have an inclusive hiring module where learners are asked to commit to reviewing their hiring practices and leveraging tools like standardized rubrics or interview guides. Or maybe they can just practice applying a framework that they learned in an immersive environment for feedback and short just-in-time scenarios. So that tied with peer learning through group discussions or learning buddies really helps drive accountability and deepen the connection from what they see in an immersive experience to their real life workplace. And ultimately, none of this is possible or meaningful if you don't measure the organizational impact. Are teams more engaged? Are they more productive? Does it improve talent retention? At Praxis, we have a client impact team that takes a really consultative approach where we work with DEI and learning leaders to showcase how immersive training achieves their goals and connects outcomes to retention, engagement, and overall company culture. So ultimately, we need to work with solutions and think about solutions that prioritize tracking these metrics or provide leading indicators to work with people analytics data.
Yeah, I mean, you shared so many nuggets for folks who are thinking about deploying immersive learning, some of the pitfalls, but also where there's opportunity. And it's that, like you just said, it's that connection to that real business outcome, that real ROI, that proof point that this is working. So I think we only have about 4 minutes left, but it looks like there are a couple questions that have come up. The first is, what advice do you have for teams getting started with immersive tech?
It's a great question. I think from my point of view, it's never too late or too early to get started. I think it is about just taking that first step, making sure that you have the relevant partners on board, whether it's DEI partners, L&D, HR, people analytics, like all of the folks that you need to make sure that we have a successful rollout, executive buy-in, and making sure that the communications is really clear across the spectrum, where we know what we're trying to drive. We know that we have an aligned end goal, and it's all about the strategy of rolling it out.
Yeah. And again, only 3 minutes left, so we'll try and go quick. But it looks like folks really are trying to think about how to get started. So, is immersive learning actually scalable?
I think that's a great question. When people think about immersive learning, they always think about the headsets and like being able to get it set up and all of the friction that is associated with not knowing or like adopting a new technology. One of the things that we are trying to redefine and make sure that it's clear is immersive tech can span headsets, but it can also span web browsers and mobile devices. And we found at Praxis Labs that the web experiences are just as powerful as headsets and can be even more affordable and scalable at the enterprise scale. So especially when you think about instructor-led or e-learning training, immersive really comes at that competitive price point, at a scalable approach without sacrificing the impact. In fact, probably being even more impactful.
Yeah, no, I think that is spot on. I think that's exactly what we've seen with our partners, what we're hearing and reading in the field and in the market. And so I know we're running out of time. Heather, last question for you. What brings you the most joy in getting to work in product and technology, given this is a women tech network?
Wow, what a great question. For me, I think I get the most joy from understanding our clients' and learners' problems, really kind of being able to pinpoint their pain, and then coming up with some creative solutions that address it directly. I think for me, one of the most meaningful parts of starting Praxis was around when a learner actually reached out. He had just rolled out one of our very first modules. It was about hiring and stereotype threat. And this learner, types in their community Slack group, wow, I have never been through anything like that. I've been experiencing stereotype threat my entire life, but I never had the language to describe it. But that was exactly how I felt. So that was truly one of the most impactful moments for me.
Absolutely. It's not just the organizations and their outcomes, it's the individuals and their lives and their experiences. Heather, it's always so fun to be in conversation with you.
Elise, it's always a pleasure. Thank you everyone for attending, listening to our conversation and being in community together. Really excited about this.
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Bye.